Lori Vallow is now up for another trial. What can we expect? We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on this edition of Charlie Crimebuster, Charlie Crimebuster's Crime Talk. It's what a lot of people are calling the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
All right, folks, welcome to our program today. Don't forget, if you are listening for the first time or you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe button. Become a part of the subscriber for our YouTube channel. Love to have you there. Also, let me remind you, if you'd like to support the program, go to peacemakernetwork.com. There you can support the brave men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. And you can also help us with the podcasts. And then if you'd like to get caught up on any of the episodes, go to our YouTube channel, or where else can they go to find our stuff, James?
They can actually find it on any podcast platform, Podbean, Spotify, Apple, quite a few.
There you go. Or they could go over to the website, charliecrimebuster.com, right?
That's right.
Yep. So, James, we got another trial coming right down the road, right?
We do. We have Lori Vallow-Daybell is going to be facing a murder trial of Charles in Arizona coming up.
That's right. It's going to be all the way to Arizona. And this is a charge that a lot of us have been, we've been kind of waiting to see this particular trial come to be. It's a little different spin on things. This was, of course, with her fourth husband. That lady had a bunch of husbands, didn't she?
Yes, she did. She did.
Chad was her fifth husband.
Fifth husband, yeah.
Yeah,
she did. Yeah.
It reminded me of an old story I used to hear years ago about a guy that went into or a lady that went into a home of this older lady, and this young lady walked in there and she saw all these urns there on the mantle and said, "Well, who's that?" She said, "Well, that's my first husband right there." And said, "Well, what's that one?" "Oh, said, that was my second one." "Well, what about that one?" "Well, that's my third one." And then, well, that's my fourth one. And then all of a sudden, this young lady broke down and just started crying, James. She just started bawling.
Really?
And the old lady said, "Well, I didn't realize you were so sentimental. I didn't mean to disturb you. I didn't mean to depress you." She said, "Well, she said, I'm not crying because of that. I'm crying because you have husbands to burn, and I have nary a one."
Wow.
So here is a lady that had five husbands, and I don't know that I'd want to be a part of those husbands, because bad things seem to happen to those husbands, right?
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah.
Charles Vallow wasn't the only husband that died before Lori did. She also was married to Joseph Ryan, you remember?
Yeah, Tyler's dad.
And he died of a heart attack.
Right.
There was some speculation about that, but he died of a heart attack. Charles, of course, is what this next trial is going to be all about. And then, of course, Chad, her fifth husband, we know now that as everything goes as planned, he's going to die too by the hand of the government, because he's received the death penalty. So
that's right.
So we got a trial coming up. It's going to be Lori Vallow, and she's going to be tried this time for at least conspiring to murder Charles Vallow. So what do you think about it, James?
Well, I'm just curious to know if she's going to get the same treatment that Chad did.
Well, what do you mean by the same treatment?
Is the death penalty on the table?
From what I can tell, I don't think the death penalty is on the table yet. I haven't really seen the total on it, but I don't think they're going to go for the death penalty on that one. And interesting enough, a lot of people don't realize why it was that Chad Daybell faced the death penalty and she didn't.
Exactly.
Because, she was guilty as he was in those murders, as we can tell. She was already found guilty in the same conspiring to murder her two youngest children.
Right.
And also conspiring to marry Tammy. So Chad gets the death penalty, but she gets life. And there are some people who say, well, that's because she was a woman and Chad's a man. We know that's a bunch of nonsense. The real reason that she did not get the death penalty is because they had found, well, first of all, they separated the charges. Remember, right at first, James, both of them were going to be charged at the same time, and the trial was going to go on with both of them being tried at the same time.
Right.
But then Chad's attorney came in and said, we want to separate it because Chad's attorney waived his right to a speedy trial. On the other hand, Lori's attorney, they did not waive it to a speedy trial. And because, the law says you have to be tried within so many days, and they had to go to trial, there was some newly found DNA evidence. And the court did not have the trial, or the attorneys did not have the time to send that to get it tried and tested and then brought back as evidence. So the judge thought it would be very unfair to go on with the death penalty when that one piece of evidence had not been examined. So that was the real reason why the death penalty was off the table. But, I wonder, maybe they could come back and bring it on during this next trial.
Yeah. But what was her sentence and her last conviction? It was life, yeah?
Well, she's actually been charged with a couple things people don't know. The very first charge, it actually happened back in 2020 when they could not find the children. And this was, we talked about a big surprise for Chad and Lori because they thought they had it all worked out. They were in Hawaii, and they knew that nobody knew where the children were, so they did not expect charges. But suddenly, the police tracked her down in Hawaii, and they actually charged her with two charges. One was, and it was actually it's a child, kind of a child abuse charge that you're not non-support of the children and abuse of it, so they were able to lock her up that way. But the other charges was actually conspiracy to commit murder for the deaths of Tylee, JJ, and Tammy, as well as grand theft by deception regarding the children. And she was also charged with grand theft related to the children's Social Security benefits.
Right. Yep. Fraud.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, then she didn't get the death penalty. She had that waived off the table. So then she's now facing, is it conspiracy to kill Charles?
Well, it's one count of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of the death of Charles Vallow. So it's conspiracy to commit first-degree murder.
And that's what the prosecution is going to try to prove at this next
trial. Well, the police documents, they say that evidence shows that Charles' death was a planned event, and it was necessary to prevent Charles. Charles was planning an intervention, if you please, because of they thought she was mentally unstable and going through all this thing. So he had some of the family were going to go with him, and they were going to have an intervention.
But now he also went to the police, though, didn't he? For fear of his life.
Yeah, right? He went to the police, and
that's on body cam, right?
Yeah, I mean, when he was actually said, this lady has threatened to kill me.
Right?
She says that I'm a zombie, and that I've been taken over by somebody else, and she's going to kill me if I get in her way, stand in the way. So he was in fear not only of his life, but he was also in fear of little JJ's life, and also Tylee. So he was at this point that he was killed. He was coming back to pick up little JJ, coming to her home in Arizona.
Now, when you say you come into her home, so they were separated then?
They were separated at that time.
Okay.
He was coming to the house in Arizona to pick up little JJ. She had already learned that they were going to get together as a family and try to do an intervention, but there was also something else, James, that was happening. He had already found out about the affair between Lori and Chad. He had already sent an email to Tammy. That email, by the way, had been deleted, and Tammy blocked him. But he had now told Lori that he was going to go to Tammy's house. He was going to go to where they lived, and he was going to tell her face to face and show her the evidence that she and Chad were having an affair. So things were building up there, and of course they didn't want that to happen. And so that's one of the things I think we're going to see in the trial, that the evidence that there was a motive to get rid of Charles Vallow, and that motive was just more than the fact that he was a zombie. That was just the rationalization, their weird way of trying to justify murder.
Mm-hmm.
But we do know that he was coming and going to expose their affair. He was also going to come and get JJ. Now, he couldn't do anything about Tylee because he wasn't the biological father of Tylee.
Now
But he was.
they adopted JJ, right?
They adopted JJ, yeah.
And she was
You know,
the grandson of his parents, right?
yeah. She, there was a family tie there,
Okay.
and he had that right. He was coming to get JJ, and he walked in that day, and he never walked back out of that house.
Okay. So actually, what happened when he walked in? Did she kill him or what?
Well, what happened is that according to records at first, they said that he got in there, and Alex said that Alex began to confront him about how he was treating Lori.
Okay. First of all,
And
why was Alex at Lori's house?
well, that's a good question, isn't it? I mean, I think he was at that time driving a truck, and you know, uh, authorities now believe that he was there for the purpose of killing Charles. But he was there that he had spent the night. He knew Charles was coming that day. He was in there, said that he had confronted Charles about the way he was treating Lori, and that according to Alex, he alleged that he came at him with a baseball bat and that he hit him. And then he walked into his room and he got a weapon and came back and he shot Charles Vallow point blank. And he claimed it was for self defense. And, he almost got away with it.
And were the children there? And did they corroborate the alleged?
Tylee said her statement to the police was that I was there and I saw the incident. I saw the baseball bat, but then I took little JJ out, and we were not in the house when the shooting took place.
Wow.
So and as you know, in the last trial of Chad Daybell, Chad's attorney, even tried to use that as leverage, saying that the reason why Alex killed the children was to cover up the murder of Charles Vallow.
Right.
And
I remember that. Yep.
and there were times, I got to be honest, when before I found through all these years of research, before we knew the rest of the story, at first when the children were missing, that thought even came to my mind that maybe she saw something,
Right.
and that he killed her for that. Now we know now there's much more involved in that, because
Right.
at that time we did not know. And this is when we were on this case in real time. In other words, we were on this case when they were looking for the children, didn't even know where the children were. And
Yep.
I had thought across my mind that maybe they saw something in that shooting of Charles Vallow. We knew about the shooting of Charles Vallow, and that perhaps was the reason. But at that time, we didn't know about this scale of death that Chad had set up, and also about the lightness and darkness and people becoming a zombie, overtaken by an evil spirit, and therefore the only way to get rid of them is to kill the body, and then you set the spirit free. So we didn't know about that stuff then. So I kind of, I could see why the attorney threw that out there.
Right. So what's the deal with Brandon Boudreaux? What happened here?
Well, yeah, there's another charge that we're hearing about now too, is that she'll not only be charged for conspiring with first degree murder, but for the attempted murder of Brandon Boudreaux. Now he was actually he was married to Melanie, who was the niece of Lori, and she too was wrapped up in this cult or this spiritual group of people that Chad and Lori had.
Right.
And she was believing that same way. But Brandon at that point wanted to get his children away from that. They were going through a divorce, and there was some life insurance involved there as well. And so he's coming home from the gym one morning. As he drives in, he sees this guy in the back of a Jeep, sets out a weapon and fires. And I'm telling you, it just missed his head. It's a wonder he wasn't shot. And then he saw the Jeep speed away. But while he saw that, he recognized that it looked like Charles Vallow's Jeep. Now, remember, Charles Vallow is already dead at this point.
Uh-huh.
So he recognizes that as Charles Vallow's Jeep. And so the police then, as they go into investigation, they realize two things: that Alex Cox, which you and I call Lori's spiritual hitman,
Right.
that he actually, by following his GPS with his phone, he was actually there in that area. So his phone, we know, was there in that area. And that was, that was miles and miles away from where they lived. The other thing they found is that he had actually gone online and he had searched for the address and directions to get to Brandon Werdu's place.
Wow.
The other thing I think that is fascinating that we've learned through these investigations, is certainly going to come up in this trial, was that Lori, during that same time, went online and she was Googling shootings there in that area where Brandon lived at the same time. So, people got to realize what we all leave, and you know this better than anybody because of your expertise. We all leave digital footprints.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely,
yeah.
we do. Yes, we do.
And boy, that was a big part of the trial with Chad Daybell, was this digital footprint that people were leaving, except for one person who did not leave a GPS signal. Chad Daybell, right?
Exactly.
He turned off his his location, but he should have. He wasn't very smart. He should have shared that with the rest of the group, because he sure got the rest of them in trouble, didn't it?
He did. He did. Well, now is this evidence that you just shared about the her Googling the how shootings were prevalent in that area? Is that going to be evidence bringing up in this next case?
I haven't seen all the evidence, but I would certainly I certainly think that it will be, because I know it happened. I know it was introduced in other trials, and I'm assuming that it's going to be part of the evidence in this trial as well.
Well, how much of the evidence that was in Chad's trial will be provided in this trial, or is it allowed?
Yeah. Anything that would tie her to a conspiracy would be allowed. And so I think we're going to see a lot of repeat of some of the stuff that we've seen in not only Chad's trial. Remember, we had another trial. We had her own trial prior to this with, her conviction of conspiring to murder 3 people, her younger children and Tammy. So I think we're going to see something out of all of them. Here's what I think we're going to find. I think that the prosecution is going to look and study very carefully the trial of Lori Vallow and the trial of Chad Daybell. And they're going to see what they saw that they thought would really resonate with the juries. I think we're going to see that brought out and put on big time. Now, on the other hand, keep in mind something else. Not only do they have the benefit of knowing what took place in that trial, but her new attorneys now will have that benefit too. So it's really going to be interesting. So I hope the folks are really bear with us as we do some reporting on this trial, because it's going to be really interesting to see what the defense does in defending her.
Well, I feel kind of sorry for the defense because he's having to look over 15 terabytes of information, in addition to 100,000 pages of documentation.
Yeah.
So when you think about, I'm an IT guy, 15 terabytes, that's a lot of information. And unless it's video or
give us an example of how much information that is. Anything that somebody like me and a lot of our listeners who are not as knowledgeable on that as you are, how much is that?
It's probably 1 floor of the Library of Congress.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of stuff to go through, isn't it?
Yeah. If you're in the Library of Congress, if you've ever been to the Library of Congress, you know how big that place is. And all those books, all those documents. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they'll have to go through. But they've had I'm sure that these attorneys have had a lot of time to research these two trials, and I'm sure they're going to get a lot of information from those trials in going forward. Now, one thing I am going to we're going to work on to have for our listeners is we want to see a little bit about Arizona law and how Arizona
Right.
law may be a little different from other laws, because
Right.
in every state it's a little different on what they can and can't do. So we'll get our listeners up to date on that and try to get them ready for that so they can understand what's taking place during that time.
Is there a smoking gun in this Charles Vallow murder case?
I think the smoking gun will be a lot of the same thing that we've seen, but I imagine the biggest thing that I think is going to be the fact that when they went back and took another look at the death of Charles Vallow, and at first they were told, well, I just shot him in self-defense, and I immediately called 911. But now we know that as they looked at the death and really researched it, and the medical examiner got involved and they really looked at it, he did not immediately call 911. It was many, 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 many minutes
42
that went
minutes.
by. Yeah, 42
Yeah.
minutes before they called. And not only did he just do that one shot, but while he was on the ground, he literally stood above Charles
Overhand. Yeah.
Vallow overhand and
Yep.
shot him. He
Yep.
murdered him. I mean, it wasn't, and I think that that's going to be the smoking gun that ties this to murder. And then they're going to, for Lori, just like I said, she immediately, you look at her activity that day, it's just crazy. I mean, remember, she left the house.
Yep.
Her estranged husband is lying dead or dying, probably at that point. He's dying, bleeding out on her floor, and she goes about like it's any other day. She takes, goes to the store and buys some flip flops. She goes through Burger King and get some food, Then she comes around after she drops the kids off. She comes back and she's leaning up against the car in police video, and she's chatting with the officer like it's another day. She even makes a joke about it, and says,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, look at all the neighbors. Sorry, neighbors," And
Yeah.
also, and I think, the thing that's really going to resonate with the jury is that they're going to bring somebody in also that's going to say that later on that very afternoon, on that same afternoon, when he was bleeding out on the floor and she was acting like it was just any other day and joking about it, that same afternoon, people said they heard a loud pool party taking place there in the residence.
Oh my goodness.
So, I think
Wow.
this is going to show, a lot of things can be said about Lori Vallow. We know that mentally they had her, in a psychiatric treatment to get ready to bear so she could go to the trial. But if anything I know about Lori Vallow from what I've seen, it is a clear cut revelation that she is a sociopath,
Right.
that
Yep.
she has no feelings whatsoever of guilt about that. Even, and I was looking at this and we're talking about all these husbands she had. Even when Joseph Ryan had died, she was reported, people reported that she had wished him dead and said that she wanted to kill him. So, this lady,
Wow.
she is a cold-blooded killer, even though she may not have gotten her hands dirty. She used her spiritual hitman to do that. This lady is a psychopath, and I'm telling you, I'm glad finally the police and everybody worked together and they put a stop to this. It's untelling how many other people might have died
Oh
if
yeah.
this thing if they hadn't found the children.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So what's the smoking gun in Brandon Boudreaux's place? What's going
Well,
on there?
I think in Brandon, the smoking gun, I think would be very simply this: is that as we said earlier, they have the GPS uh, digital footprint of Alex Cox. They know that he went online and he researched how to get to the area, directions there. We know that the Jeep that was used was Charles Vallow's Jeep. We know they took the wheel off of that back of the Jeep so they could lower the window and he could have a shot at it. And then I think with Lori herself, then researching, trying to find out if there was anything online about shootings there in that area where it happened. So I think that's the smoking gun. The smoking gun is that they can actually put Alex Cox there, and they can actually put Lori Vallow in her own concern about what was happening there. So she had to know what was happening in that situation.
Didn't Brandon Boudreaux look over some emails that he had gotten with regard to like his status? I think I heard one about the letter D was beside his name or something.
He was very helpful because he had a lot of the inside information about this group that was taking place, and he actually helped the police, I think, in putting together a lot of the things that was going on with that. And keep in mind also, there was an insurance policy tied to him as well.
Right.
And that's something that you see that's common in all of this. There was, I think when they were talking about this trial, they were saying sex, money, and power. Well, the money has always been there.
Right.
She thought she was going to get Charles's $1 million insurance.
Right.
They actually got Tammy's insurance, and they thought also that Melanie, who was a part of their group, would get an insurance payoff with Brandon as well. So money has always been a part of it. And don't forget the Social Security that she was receiving from the children.
Right.
And even Charles Vallow, his Social Security. So there was money tied in this as well. So I think we got another very interesting trial, and I'm kind of be glad that when this trial gets through, because I think it's time to put this to rest and make sure everybody has justice.
Yeah, I agree. Well, what do you think is going to be different between the two trials, Lori's and Chad Daybell's? What do you think are going to be some of the major differences?
I don't know that it would be a whole lot different. I think there'll be a lot of the things. What I surmise, though, I don't think it's going to be a long, drawn-out trial. I don't think it's going to be as long as these other trials, because there's been more things to prove with the other trials. I think this one's going to be pretty short, and I think it's going to be to the point, and I think we're going to see a guilty verdict.
I agree. Wrap it up. What are we going to expect for this coming Sunday?
Well, this coming Sunday, we're going to take another run at this. We're going to talk about some of the things that are happening in the trial, what folks need to know. We're going to find some more information about Arizona law so that our people can, know really what's going on with the law, this sort of thing.
Right.
And so we're going to try to get people ready for this coming trial, and then move right along. We've got a lot of other stuff we're going to be looking at this summer. Remember, we have the Rust trial coming up.
That's right.
There's a lot of things brewing right now regarding that trial. And so I think there's going to be some more things happen this summer that we're going to stay right on top of for the fans of Charlie Crimebuster. So until next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. Yep. For the life you save, it could be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.